Do you guys want to look at a little bit of an interview between Joe Rogan and Dr. Rhonda Patrick? I saw this clip. She did a really great job of casually bringing up that there's a lot of vaccine disinformation being spread. And she sort of seemed to be calling out Joe. It was actually pretty well done. Let's get right into it. Let's make sure we've got 1080p for everybody. Let's listen. This is interesting.
Everywhere, Facebook, on different news media outlets, and I think there's really like some main ones that I just feel are causing harm. And so there's really 8 of them. We don't need to talk about all of them, but I think the 8 really are that SARS-CoV-2 is not that bad. COVID-19 is not that bad, and vaccines basically don't prevent transmission. Spike protein from vaccines are cytotoxic, therefore they're really bad.
Now, that's a specific one that Brett Weinstein has been spreading. She's really, she doesn't say it, but she's going after all sorts of stuff that's been perpetuated on this very program.
That vaccines are going to cause something called antibody-dependent enhancement, which is going to make you have a more severe disease.
I think that's also a Weinstein thing.
There's the vaccines are going to cause infertility. There's the vaccines are going to cause a more virulent strain or variant. And then there's one more that, alternatives to vaccines exist right now that are just as good. And I think that there's a few of those that are really, just like blatantly, they're wrong. All of them, I think but there's some that are more important than others. And I think that I would like to talk about them. I think first and foremost, there's like 2 groups of people. Mostly, one thinks COVID-19 is bad, doesn't want it, wants the vaccine, and the other one that thinks it's not that bad and that the vaccines may be harmful. And there's also
Do you think the vaccines are harmful to anyone?
Well, of course.
See, that's sort of like a weird question. But a lot of these questions are deliberately trying to get away from the plot. Anyway, but Dr. Patrick handles it well.
Do you know anyone that's had bad reactions to vaccines?
And again, that's like, if I did, what would that change about the big picture, right?
Personally, interestingly, I know a lot of people that have gotten vaccinated, and the only person that I know that had something was like, she had a headache for like a week and a half, and then it went away. Oh no, another person I knew had like nausea for like a couple of weeks. They were like nauseous more frequently, but it went away.
Do you think you would feel differently if you knew someone that had a stroke?
So the question there is actually, if you were aware of an anecdote personally that was statistically irrelevant, would you have a completely different view as to the empirical findings? That's the question, Or
someone who's had heart attacks, perhaps young people that have?
Well, it's hard to say. So, people react differently, obviously. When you're giving, more than 169 million people are vaccinated, right? That's half our adult population is vaccinated, fully vaccinated with COVID-19. And it's not zero risk. Some people are going to have an adverse reaction. And they do. It's a big world out there. Like if you were to give 169 million people a peanut or a shellfish, like some people are going to have very adverse reactions. Some
very, very important point there.
People are going to die. Like it's a big world. But, with the stroke or the heart attack, you have to so if you're trying to compare, for example, let's say, you're looking at actual COVID-19 deaths and from heart attacks and strokes, and you're looking at the vaccine adverse events reporting site VAERS, right? And that as well. You have to realize that basically in the United States, like in 2017, there was a publication in the Journal of Circulation. Someone dies from cardiovascular disease every 30 seconds in the United States. Like every 30 seconds. Most of those people are above the age of 50, and certainly most are above 65. But every 30 seconds, someone's dying from cardiovascular disease. Every 40 seconds, someone in the United States has a stroke. Every 4 minutes, they die from a stroke.
But this is also very, very rare in young people, particularly young, healthy people. But one thing that has occurred in young, healthy people that have been vaccinated is myocarditis. And
So that's important. Whoa! Oh my God, where do we go? That's important. I think there was also a study last week which said, whoops, the first data on the frequency of the myocarditis was also dramatically overblown. That's important. Important now to have that updated data.
Blood clots, like quite a few blood clots. And
my understanding is the blood clots was almost exclusively women of premenopausal age.
There's speculation, right? The Salk Institute released that paper about the spike protein causing some sort of deterioration of the blood vessels. Did you read that?
I looked at the spike. I've been looking at a lot of the spike protein, and
that's from COVID-19. They're discussing it.
They're talking about from
the actual disease itself.
Yes. So first of all, like
one of the issues with this segment, and it's already happening, is that they were dancing around, and Sam Harris actually has a really, really, really good. Maybe I can find it. You don't have to like everything Sam Harris says. Let me see if I can find Sam Harris. It was on a Sam Harris Q&A. This is the one. In this one, Sam Harris actually explains the problem. Now I'm jumping around.
Best to believe the unbelievable.
But let's see if I can find where he talks about this.
Out remains the purpose of this podcast. Hey, Corey. Thanks for the question. Yeah, this is a hard one for me, actually. I get...
The question is, why isn't Sam Harris debating people like Weinstein, et cetera?
It seems crazy not to just flip on the microphone and talk to the guy, or talk to him and Heather.
This is really good.
His partner in crime. It's hard to put this in a way that doesn't sound like a personal attack, but the reason why I don't want to do a podcast with Brett and Heather is the same as why I wouldn't do a podcast with a 9/11 truth conspiracy theorist or Alex Jones or anyone in that world. Because there's a basic asymmetry which is very hard to overcome. It
just happened in the Rogan interview. What he describes here just happened. Listen to this.
Much easier to make a mess than to clean it up. It's so much easier to light several small fires than to put them out. It's like a 10-to-1 advantage. To put it that way, it sounds like my concern is not losing a debate, and that's absolutely not my concern. If you're going to view this as a debate, it's won almost immediately. But I worry about what people take from the encounter, and I just don't want to do additional harm to our public conversation about what is in fact an important public health concern and a growing political one. First, the asymmetry. The reason why there's such an asymmetry here is that it is just impossible to debunk most things in real time.
Right.
And even if the point being made is in fact spurious, it won't seem spurious to 99% of an audience.
So let's go back and look at what just happened here, okay? Look at what just happened here.
The spike protein causing some... And
yes.
Some people have had blood clots, like quite a few blood clots. And there's speculation, right? The Salk Institute released that paper about the spike protein causing some sort of deterioration of the blood vessels. Did you read that?
The Salk Institute released a paper about the spike protein causing some kind of deterioration of the blood vessels. Did you read that? I don't know. I didn't. Oh, my God. How is Dr. Patrick on here talking about this? She doesn't even know about the Salk Institute paper, which said something about the spike protein maybe causing the deterioration of blood vessels, which means what? What's the greater context? That's exactly what Sam Harris is talking about here. Well, she wasn't prepared on that. She through no fault of her own, she didn't look at that paper maybe, right? And it's exactly what he's describing here.
Right. So the person on the conspiracy theory side of things can say, well, what about the 14 CDC officials who resigned
you guys are listening, right?
last week and wouldn't give reasons when asked? What do you make of that? Right now, there's probably nothing to be made of that, right? I didn't even hear about it. And the truth is I just made that up. But when delivered in the context of a, quote, debate about these things with someone whose whole angle is there's conspiracy everywhere, it can seem like, oh, you didn't know about that. Well, that's clearly a problem. You should look into that. What about the paper that just came out of Micronesia that showed ivermectin was 100% effective? I didn't see that paper out of Micronesia.
Oh my God, how could you be here talking about it without seeing the Micronesia paper?
Oh, you didn't? Well, okay, you should really do your homework. It's possible to just scatter a lot of dust in the eyes and ears of the audience and make it seem
And by the way, how many people will just repeat the Micronesia paper after hearing it mentioned without ever even looking as to whether it exists or what it says?
like there's so many anomalies out there. There's so many things that need to be explained. And if you're not going to explain those things, if you're not going to connect this particular pattern of dots, well, then you're just not doing the work.
Right.
And that need not necessarily be done in bad faith. Of course, it can be, right? It's a tactic. But that's not what I'm alleging Brett and Heather would do. I'm just saying that's the way they think now. It's such a scattershot approach to this.
And so that scattershot nature is exactly what we're seeing here. Let's listen to a little more of it.
I looked at the spike. I've been looking at a lot of the spike protein, and
That's from COVID-19. They're discussing it.
they're talking about from
the actual disease itself.
Yes. So, first of all, like you have to
Now, if I even understand what's being said, the paper that Rogan is referencing, if understood correctly, is saying that that's a result of getting COVID, not of the vaccine. And again, it's hard to even follow it all because of its scattershot nature.
You're either going to get infected with SARS-CoV-2. Most people are going to be eventually. We're all going to be exposed to it. So you're either going to be vaccinated when you're exposed to it or not. And people are dying from heart attacks and blood clots, and even people are getting myocarditis like 100-fold times more than vaccines. Like the myocarditis link from the mRNA, specifically the mRNA vaccines, is real. And I think the last I saw it was like 50 per million, which is still rare. And it's
happened to two people that I know.
Up until then, and
again, that doesn't really matter. What is the rate? If 2 of the 50 out of a million Rogan knows or not? I just don't understand why that matters.
Actually, now that you asked me, I forgot. I had someone who's a supporter. I talked about vaccines in one of my Q&As I do, and they went and got it, and they were younger and ended up having some kind of myocarditis. So I do know someone that had I don't know them, but they emailed me.
She's heard of someone.
What happens if you have that? And how do you recover from that?
But you realize it's happening to young people. So myocarditis is caused by 2 things. 1, by inflammation. 2, by direct viral infection. And it's more common in adolescents and young people.
And it's an enlargement of the heart?
It's inflammation of the heart. It can lead to that, yeah. But it's happening in young athletes with COVID-19, and it's happening more frequently than people that are getting vaccinated. So
right. It's an important point. The myocarditis risk from COVID-19 to the same cohort of young people is greater than the risk of myocarditis from the vaccine. Important point.
Still, if the person that got vaccinated, look, it is a risk, but it's still pretty rare, and it also is treatable. In most cases, they treat it within a few days, and it's isolated.
Why do you think that people, there are people that are completely asymptomatic when they get COVID, or if they do get it, it's very mild?
You see how we're on a completely different topic now, and that's I listened to other parts of this episode, and Dr. Rhonda Patrick's talking about supplements and different things that I don't really know much about whether it's trustworthy or not. But in this particular portion of this interview, she's sort of trying to stay on the 8 types of COVID disinformation, and it's very difficult to do.
Do you think that's because they have a lower viral load that they've been infected with?
I don't know.
Do you think it's their immune system that fights it off? What do you think is happening?
It could be any and all of those things,
Right.
a combination of them. And, but so even if you think, if you're looking at just the most extreme part of the deaths, right? You've got over 624,000 deaths in COVID-19. Most of those deaths are happening in people over the age of 50. And if you look at like,
most of them have 4+ comorbidity factors, right? Isn't that the average?
I don't know if it's
Okay, so now they just talk about the number of comorbidities, which is another thing. All right, so you guys get the point. So the point there is she did go on and make a good faith effort to sort of point out some of the important disinformation that's being spread, and it kind of gets all mixed around like a blender. And then you're trying to figure out what's what. It's all kind of mushed together like a paste, a horse paste, some might say. Yeah, so it's kind of disappointing, but I think that what Sam Harris outlined is very accurate. We'll listen to like a little bit more of it.
So little quality control around the kind of information they're putting forward. And it takes such an effort to chase it all down and debunk it. And anything that shows up that's new in the conversation can't be tracked down in real time. So I don't have much hope that a conversation would wind up producing a document that would be good for the world. The truth is, I'm not the best person to have the conversation either. It would be good to have an immunologist or a virologist or...
Yeah. All right. So you guys get the picture. And I think that what Sam Harris is making some really good points there. And in fact, a lot of what Sam Harris kind of mirrors one of the views, some of the views espoused by Neil Postman in his book on technopoly called Technopoly. Funny enough, the book is called the same thing that the subject is, from 1992. And it relates to this dynamic that takes place where when technologies, let me see if I want to try to get this right. When a technology becomes in a technopoly where we just sort of say like, just give us the new technology and then we'll figure out how to use it and if it's good or bad or whatever. When the technology becomes invisible, like right now, the technology of high-speed internet and social media is invisible in the conversation we're having. We're talking about a specific show, the Joe Rogan show, and Sam Harris's view on these so-called debates about COVID disinformation. Invisible to that is that it's all enabled by high-speed internet, modern computing, and social media. And a lot of this is simply a result of the availability of information, the idea that more information is always better. And of course, in some vague sense, having access to more information is better on balance, but additional information also has diminishing marginal returns. And the sort of prototypical example is if you're going to buy a car, before you had to go to the dealer and just get your information from the dealer who had like a little booklet from the manufacturer. Okay. Now you have additional information. Thanks to the internet, you can now find out reviews about the car. You can go to Edmunds and figure out what are people actually reporting that they're paying for the car. It's information that gives you more substantive basis for deciding on the car, and that's good. But at a certain point, the value of that additional information starts to diminish. Once you get down to, well, what spark plugs does this car versus I drive electric, so I don't know if I'm using the right terms. What about the carburetor? I think that's how they say it. The carburetor of this car versus that car. What are the reviews of that and who makes it? And all these. At a certain point, this is like, it doesn't actually really give us much. It starts to diminish in value and even arguably become negative if it paralyzes you and makes you unable to know anything about a car. That's kind of the analogy to what's been happening with a lot of this COVID and vaccine disinformation, and a lot of other stuff that's going on. Availability and people falsely believing that they are as good as anyone else at understanding and evaluating information. Anyway, I think we get it.